And here go the boys in orange opening off the Coral Gables holiday parade with a flyover. Like many first responders, the boys in orange don't really get any time off over the holidays. In fact, in many cases, they have to kick it into an extra gear, just kind of like what we'll see during the feature story on this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. But before we get the boating news started, back by popular demand, that's right, we're doing a giveaway. We've been out of stock for the last few weeks, but the Drain Plug Mafia tumblers finally arrived at the studio yesterday, so we're doing a giveaway today. Really simple. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hit the like button right now, and leave a comment below, and we will pick our favorite comment, and somebody's gonna win a tumbler, just like Tom G did a few weeks back as he gets ready to enjoy using his out on Lake Norman this summer. But let's go ahead and get this week's episode of the boating news started. This week's story we actually first featured on our Facebook page back on December 12th when the Coast Guard issued a marine warning that the 30-foot sailing vessel Atrevida 2 had not made its final destination. Now, the story actually begins back on November 27th when 65-year-old Kevin Hyde and 76-year-old Joe Tomaso departed Cape May on the 30-foot sailing vessel en route to the warmer, sunnier weather of the Florida Keys. The two did make a stop on December 3rd in Oregon Inlet, North Carolina, which is the last contact at that point they had made with their family, letting them know they were going back out the inlet that afternoon, heading south around Cape Hatteras and continuing on down to Florida. But as of December 11th, the family had not heard from the crew again, and there was no signs that the crew had made their final destination of the Florida Keys. At this point, the family alerted local authorities and the U.S. Coast Guard to the fact that the crew had basically been missing for 8 days at this point and they were unsure of their location. The U.S. Coast Guard issued an urgent marine notice letting mariners know to be on the lookout for the Atrevida 2. The Coast Guard launched a massive search and rescue effort involving planes, helicopters, and boats with a plan to cover more than 21,000 square miles from Massachusetts to Florida. A U.S. Navy cruiser as well as many commercial and recreational vessels were also involved in the search. The search finally broke a little luck on December 13th as seen in the images you've been watching, when the Silver Luna, a tanker vessel, spotted a boat off in the distance almost 200 miles east of the coast of Delaware. That's right, in the complete wrong direction this crew was supposed to be going. As they approached the vessel, they saw the vessel had lost its mast, power, and was also out of fuel and was completely at the mercy of the seas. The crew of the Silver Luna quickly jumped into action to rescue the two crew members off the sailing vessel as well as their dog that had been along on the trip with them also. Once on board the tanker vessel, they tell their story of leaving Oregon Inlet, where in the night they hit a heavy storm with 40-foot seas causing them to lose the mast. They tried to power through the storm, but the winds and currents were too strong and continued to push their vessel off course, eventually causing them to run out of fuel and then run out of power. Thankfully, the two sailors were both rescued and the dog without any major injuries. Once they got back to the mainland, Kevin recalls the incident as they left Oregon Inlet at a local press conference.
Oh, it was hunky-dory when we left out of Oregon Inlet. We were sailing along having a good time, and then as nighttime came down, we had almost made the point of Hatteras. Yeah, Hatteras. We were going to turn south into Hatteras, and just as we got to that point, a huge storm blew up and just blew us off course, and I lost part of my mast, so I didn't have the power to make the turn. So by that time we were just being pushed out to sea farther and farther, and you couldn't come back because the current and the wind. So then the next day I made a jury rig for the sail and thought we were starting to make some way, but I kept checking my GPS and we were actually losing more ground. So it was just kind of a small miracle that we were found at all, to tell you the truth. We were out of the shipping lane by that time almost. It was probably the last ship that would have been able to find us.
During the press conference, the other crew member Joe was asked what the scariest part of the experience was.
The scariest part when that boom came down. It's a 50-foot high for the sails. And that broke, came down. Kevin ran up and cut the lines to get it off the boat because it was hanging over the side, 50-foot mast. Once we cut that mast off, 40-foot seas, there were mountains, I was watching them. And with that mast cut off, it has a lead keel, and that boat rode so good. That boat could take it, but guess what? We couldn't.
And this one's talked about quite often, especially in rough seas. There are many vessels out there that can handle rough seas great. In fact, so great that typically they can handle it better than us as humans can. Joe was also asked if he thought at any point in time they weren't going to make it back.
Of course. We didn't have no more water left, nothing. We were sucking water out of the water lines, cutting them just to get water. We didn't have water for 2 days. And I bought these beans, and the best part about the beans, they have water in them. They were soaked in water, and we're taking sips at a time.
Joe and Kevin were extremely fortunate in this situation and lucky to be able to spend Christmas with their family, but the Coast Guard does remind you, if you're going to tackle any large trips offshore like this, make sure you have the proper equipment. An EPIRB or a personal locator beacon would have drastically cut down the time on the rescue on this one, and they would have been rescued much sooner, so if you're going offshore on a long trip, make sure you have one. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening out on your waterways, be sure to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram and let us know, and you might see your story over here. And if you haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button here. If not, we're coming to steal your drain plug.